welcome back. I hope you're gonna enjoy this video. In this video, I'll be talking you through the books that I read in October because it's November, the second to last month in the fucking year. Oh my fucking god. Anyways, I'm gonna talk you through the books that I read in October. I didn't read as much as I hoped I would. I thought I would. I read 8 books, which isn't bad at all. It's an okay amount. But I got in a bit of a reading slump in the last half of the month, and I'm really disappointed by that because I really wanted to read more, but I didn't. So we have 8 books here that I'm going to talk you through. 8 books that I'm going to talk about a little bit what the book was about and all that kind of stuff, what I thought of it. So I hope you enjoy, and let's just get into it right away. So the first book that I read in October was a bit of a wild card and a wild ride at the end. It was Bunny by Mona Awad. Oh my fucking god. Honestly, if you were to ask me right now, what was the general consensus? What was the general plot of the book? I could only tell you what the back of the book says, nothing else, because that was a fever dream. It was good. I gave it 3 stars at the end. So I can tell you a little bit about what the beginning of the book was about, but the last half I cannot tell you shit about because I honestly don't even know what happened. It was just so confusing to me. But it's basically about this girl, and she goes to the school, and in the school there's this group that call each other the Bunnies, and it's kind of this cult-like organization with these girls, and she gets invited to the smut salon, as they call it. She gets invited, she goes to that smut salon, she gets dragged into this cult-like thing going on, and that is basically the premise of the story. But that was the first half, and I expected it to go on for the full book, but it didn't go on for the full book, in my opinion. Then the last half was just so confusing. Some things happened where I was like, is this even real? Or is she just imagining this? A lot of questions came to mind when I read this book, and I still haven't gotten the answers, and I don't think I ever will, but I can definitely understand why people rate this 5 stars, because it's confusing, but it's confusing in a good way. But I felt dumb because I was so confused. It was a good book. I enjoyed the first half more than the second half, but it was still a fine book. It was still a good book. I still enjoyed it, and I made a reading vlog out of it. Reading unhinged books. I will link it somewhere here above. The next book that I read in October. I have another ebook. So that is Ruthless Fae? Okay, anyways, there's a picture here. It's Zodiac Academy 2. I read the first book, I think, a month or 2 ago. I really enjoyed that. I was hoping for it to be a 5 stars, this book. Alas, it was not. I think I ended up rating it a 4 star, which is still a very good rating. And I do think the rest of the series has the potential to become a 5 star series for me. A little bit about the plot. In the first book, there are these 2 girls, Tori Vega and Darcy Vega. So they got told by this professor at the school, okay, you're Fae, haha. So you have to come to this different reality world, and it's called Solaria. So they go there, they're like, what the actual fuck? Turns out they have magic and stuff, they're Fae, and they're long-lost princesses. It's kind of like a cliche time, honestly, but it's a really good time. There are these heirs, these 4 heirs. They got trained from birth to become basically the rulers of Solaria. Now these 2 princesses, Tori and Darcy, come in, and they suspect that Tori and Darcy want to take the throne for themselves. They kind of bully them and try to get them out of Zodiac Academy, and so they get the throne back again. We're still following that in the second book, but it's like a really cool academic setting, and I really enjoy that. So I really enjoyed this. I think I've talked about this for like 3 minutes now. It's just a really good book, and I enjoyed it. For the plot and for the introduction that we got, I think I enjoyed the first book. But for the rest of the book and the bullying, I think that really took part of my rating down. And I didn't read that book this month, but I still want to talk about it. But then the second book, that was a little bit better in terms of the bullying. There was still a lot of bullying going on, but the Vega twins were finally standing up for themselves. In terms of the characters, I think I enjoyed the second book more, but in terms of the plot, I think I enjoyed the first book more. This is the second book that I read in the month, and I also included this in a reading vlog. My TBR jar picks the books that I read. So it was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I ended up rating this a 4.5, and why have I not read this sooner? Come on, this needed to be where I was when I was in my Harry Potter phase. I knew of its existence, but I didn't know it was this good. I don't think I have to tell you anything about this, but if you do want to know, it's about Katniss and these Hunger Games. And these Hunger Games are basically like these competition to death. So these people from every district, 2 people from every district, so there's 12 districts, so 24 people fight to the death until only one survives, and that is the winner of the annual Hunger Games. And this girl, Katniss, she gets picked to compete in these Hunger Games. I'm so amazed by what authors can achieve by writing, because oh my god, this was so good. And you did notice that it was very YA writing style, but it didn't bother me at all. I would call this really positive. I really enjoyed this. A bit of a disappointing read in that same video that I read the Hunger Games in. Fall, Ruin, and Wrath by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the author that wrote the Blood and Ash series, the Shadow and the Ember series. The premise of the story sounded so interesting. I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be my new favorite Jennifer L. Armentrout book. Spoiler alert, it was not at all. I didn't really love this book. I gave it, I think, a 3.5 for something that was advertised to me as a fantasy romance. I didn't even notice that it was a fantasy because there was so much romance. It's basically about this girl, what's her name, Liz? This world is divided in highborn, lowborn, and then something in between that as well. She saves a highborn, this basically magical creature, I guess. It's kind of like a fae, you know, it's kind of like a fairy. She saves him. They part ways after she saves him. They meet again. Then they part ways again. They meet again. And it's like faith is pulling them together, I guess. That's basically like a loose premise of the story because there's more going on. But I don't remember. And it was still fine, but I didn't love it as much as I did the Blood and Ash series or the Shadow and the Ember series. This is the last book that I read before I got in a bit of a reading slump. So it was Midnight Ruin by Katie Robert. It had nothing to do with this book, by the way, because this book was so fast-paced. I really enjoyed it. This is a continuation of the previous books in the series, but this is about different characters. It's about the sister of two characters that we followed in the previous books. Olympus is kind of not what it was anymore. If you want, by the way, if you want a better description, you have to watch the video that I made. This girl, she got betrayed by her ex, and her ex kind of wants to win her back, so we're seeing that. But she's also in a relationship, a situationship with her best friend / bodyguard. I would strongly recommend you to read the first book and go on from there, because if you read this book, you will be incredibly confused and you wouldn't understand all of it. In this book, there were more politics. It was more politic based than it was in the previous books in the series. For something that was advertised again as a romance, I was hoping for a little less politics and a bit more romance, because I didn't feel like the romance was really romancing, you know? I gave it 4 stars. It was still a pretty decent book. I still really enjoyed it. I think this book could go into my top 3 of my favorite books in that series. It was a fun, quick time. It's short, it's easy, it's just really good. We have 2 books now. I am filming a reading vlog reading these books, and I have not finished that reading vlog because of the reading slump. I expected to have already finished this reading vlog, but alas, I have not. So it's a Pumpkin Spice Cafe in the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. I read this one first, obviously, because this is the first book. And let's talk about this book first. I had really low expectations for this book because of the fact that I heard really negative things. I checked the Goodreads ratings, and they were not positive at all. It has like a 3.4 average rating on Goodreads, which not very good compared to other books. So I was apprehensive going into this, but I really loved this. I love the chemistry between the characters. I loved the relationship that they had. I didn't find any of the characters annoying, which I saw in a few reviews that they said that they thought the characters were annoying. I don't see what they see, but I really thought this was a cute book. It was just a decent book. I gave it 4 stars. There's also like a little mystery going on in this, and it was just so cute. Jeannie, the main character in this book, she gets this Pumpkin Spice Cafe from her aunt, and she has to live there as well. Like, there's an apartment above the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. So she lives in the apartment above the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and she has to run this Pumpkin Spice Cafe. But she hears strange noises coming from downstairs. She hears this scratching, this howling. So she's like, oh my god, is this house haunted? Is this cafe haunted? What do I do? So she basically asked this grumpy kind of local farmer to help her figure out what is scratching at the door, if it's a ghost, what they should do about it. And that is basically the first part of the mystery. Then that mystery gets solved, and then there's a little other mystery going on. But that felt really anticlimactic at the end, because it did get solved. But I was like, is this it? Because this is so dumb. But it was still a really good book, and I didn't read this book for the mystery. I read it for the romance, and the romance was definitely romancing to me. Then I read The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. This was also a 4-star read. When I read the first half, I wanted to rate this a 4.25, maybe a 4.5, because I was really loving it and I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. This follows another kind of mystery. It's about Hazel, a friend of male main character in this book and a friend of the female main character in this book. So it follows Hazel and Noah. Noah is also a friend of the male main character in this book, in the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. Hazel gets these secret messages written out in her books because she owns a bookstore. So she sees this book that is kind of tilted out of the shelves, and she's like, oh my god, I need to put it back. But she sees someone dog-ear the page, and he's like, the scandal! Someone damaged the book that I own that is in my bookstore. She flips to that page, and she sees that someone highlighted a sentence in that book. She's like, oh my god, can this day get even worse? So she sees what is highlighted, and she feels like that's a message to her personally. And more of these messages start coming along, more of these books start getting ruined, and she's kind of mad about it, but she also wants to figure out who did it. And she also wants to do these things that the messages basically says that she should do. Basically, Noah is in the bookstore when she finds the first clue, I guess. And he says, okay, I can help you with that. So they start going on all of these adventures together, and they slowly fall in love. So this was a good book. Something really irked me, and I will talk about that more in the reading vlog that I'm doing. I think that would be the next video that I post. It was still a good book, but I expected more of it. The last book that I read in October was The Fucking Wrong Guy by Sara, and this is also in that video. This was just a fun time. It was not as good as the first book because this is the second book in the series. This is about a model, Blake. She has this really low self-esteem, and then it's about Ari. And Ari, he kind of stalks her. He's like, oh my god, I need to find her again because they have already known each other for a while. So they were in the same group home, foster home. They got separated because Blake got adopted. Now Ari finds her again, and he stalks her because he wants to be with her. He's like, oh my god, she's the one, she's my true love, and I wouldn't do nothing to stop that from happening. So he stalks her, does some unhinged things. Not to her, but to her phone and stuff. And I didn't feel like the conclusion of this was really done well. She was like, oh my god, he didn't do it for this purpose. Well, he did do it for that purpose. It was still a good book. I rated it a 3.5, but I didn't connect with it as much as I did with the first book. I do own the third book as well, and I will read that probably this month, or if not this month, next month. So yeah, that was what I wanted to say about this book. It has a lot of triggers, so definitely check trigger warnings, but it's about healing as well. It's about finding yourself, I guess. It did have an important message behind it, even if it was like a dark romance. Those were all the books that I read in October. I talked for almost 25 minutes. Every time that I talk about books, I get so immersed in talking about it that I talk for like a half an hour straight about 5 books. It's a problem, but I'm not gonna solve it because it makes for fun videos. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna grab the stack of books. These are not all of the books, obviously. I also have 2 other books that I read. So that is the stack that I do own. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of me, like this video and subscribe, of course, so you will not miss anything from me. And I hope I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.